here with Yvonne, and she called me up for deliverance prayer, and she told me a very, very interesting testimony, and I wanted to share this on my channel. So, Yvonne, you have the mic now. Just please just give us a background, like where you're from and what you believed in, and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. I always love to share my story. One, because it glorifies God, and two, I think it gives people hope that there is a way out um, of bondages in this life, but there's also a way for freedom for the next as well after we leave this earth. Um, I grew up in the north of England, pretty decent upbringing, a decent family home. There wasn't any troubles of much kind until I got to about 10. At 10-year old, my parents divorced. It wasn't a messy divorce, it was pretty amicable. But I think as a 10-year-old, I did take it pretty harsh personally. I didn't see it coming. Really, from 10, after things being a happy childhood, things sort of started to slowly deteriorate in my life. By the time I was 11, I was smoking and sort of becoming a little bit rebellious. By the time I was 13, I'd actually been introduced through friends into smoking cannabis. So that was my new kind of in-crowd thing. After about 12 months of smoking cannabis, I started to hang around and be around people that was a lot older than me. And I was introduced to heavier drugs, pills, a lot of the downers, kind of Valium, a lot of the drugs that would have got you pretty sedated. And by the time I was, just before I was 15 actually, so I was 14, not far from 15, I actually had an older boyfriend. He was almost 18, and together we got introduced to heroin. And I was bullied quite a bit at school. So I suppose I felt like I fitted in for the first time, really. My mum had to work long hours since the divorce. So I sort of found comfort in these older people. I don't think the majority of them realised how young I was. So I started taking heroin before I was 15, smoking it. I never realised the seriousness of taking heroin. I never realised how strong it was. I didn't understand that there was a detox to get off it. I was just going with the flow, taking heroin instead of smoking the weed. And it was probably about 3 months in before I actually realised that I had a problem.
So when you get high off heroin, what's it like? Like what do you go through when you're high on heroin?
I'll be honest, when I first started taking it, it gave more or less the effects of what cannabis would, but a lot stronger.
I see.
So I would be half asleep, very chilled out. But I think I actually, for some reason, liked the numbness feel of it. You know, there's a very numb feeling to taking heroin. So there is no emotions, there is no cares, there is no worries about anything. It's just quite all on one level. And for some reason, I was attracted to that. Maybe just because of the stress I'd felt at home. I think I was attracted to that.
Okay.
After 3 months, when we didn't have any money one day, me and my boyfriend, I soon started to realise that my body would hurt when I didn't take heroin. And a detox would start within, half a day. I was starting to feel achy, pains. I think that's really when my heroin addiction stepped up a little bit. Even from such a short space of time using it, my body would feel the effects of not having it. So then rather than taking it to be wasted, it was more a case of taking it to function normally, and that's what it had become. Before I was 16, I was using heroin day and night. I was smoking heroin at the back of the school bus.
Oh, wow.
People at school knew about it. My mum had found out about it. She'd found some foil, traces of heroin on foil in my bedroom, and she was absolutely devastated. I just didn't really have any respect for anybody, to be honest. That just didn't take any effect on me at all. I just carried on using.
Okay,
By the time
during the time you're using the drugs, did you have any spiritual experiences at all while you were high?
I,
Not
I
yet. Okay.
didn't, I never had
Oh, okay.
anything. You know, you hear about experiences, you know, with certain drugs out there, spiritual experiences, you know, but with heroin, as far as I know and I've lived my life, I don't really hear of that much. I never really heard of that much, to be honest, in the
Okay.
heroin world, really. Even in the crack cocaine world, which I did start taking later, I never really heard of any strange goings on, you know, nightmares or visions, or I never really heard of any of that, really. The majority of people I met were taking the heroin to just function normally. I think people who injected heroin probably had more of a powerful effect, but I only ever smoked it as I had a real phobia of needles, which probably in essence actually saved my life to a certain extent. But I'd never heard of anything like that. By the time I got to 17, my mum had kicked me out. Me and my boyfriend was homeless. We were sleeping in a car. No conviction about what we were doing or who we was hurting. I quickly had to pick up shoplifting, thieving, just to make some money. So we became shoplifters. You know, we used to steal bottles of vodka and bottles of whiskey to sell them to make money for the drugs. And we kept getting arrested on minor charges for theft. And it quickly spiraled out of control, really. By the time I was 18, when I'm 19, my boyfriend's parents had already paid for him to go in a rehab, and the relationship had fell apart. And I'd started seeing somebody else who was also using heroin. And before the age of 21, I'd been in 4 rehabs. Sometimes I'd be a couple of days clear from heroin, and then I'd go and use again. Sometimes I'd manage a few weeks, and then I'd go and use again. But I never had, it was torment day in, day out. I never had that lasting freedom. I could never keep clean. I could never achieve it. So it was I'd do the rehab, come out, and it was very short-lived, and I'd be using again. Really, then I had my first son at 21. My son, he's 19 now. I love him dearly. He was a result of an affair that I had behind my partner's back. And my partner didn't know about that till my son was 3 years old. That was just horrendous. It just shows, you know, that place where I was at. A few years later, I actually had a miscarriage. When I fell pregnant again, I almost died as a result of my drug use. I was rushed to theatre. Actually thought that everything would, I think because my first son was okay, I thought that this child would be okay. And we started to notice things that was quite right in his development at 2 months-ish, 3 months. He wasn't looking at us. He wasn't making any eye contact. He wasn't doing the normal things that a baby would do. And I remember us going, and the paediatricians checking him out at the hospital, and they arranged for an MRI scan of his brain to be done. And at 5 months old, we was pulled into a room with a team of doctors and paediatricians for children. And it even hurts now to say it, actually. My son was diagnosed as being completely blind with severe learning difficulties.
Now, when you were pregnant with them, were you involved with the New Age or the occult?
Yes, I was. With my first son, I was taking the drugs. With my second son, I had a friend who was very much into tarot cards, runes, crystals, trying to speak to people, speak to the dead. She was into all that kind of stuff. And I was actually pregnant at the time and used to be in a house on a daily basis, interacting in all that kind of stuff. So yes, I was.
Okay, so I will say that just based on praying deliverance for a lot of people and the literature I've read about deliverance, it is possible to open up the doors to your descendants if you were involved to the occult or the New Age. And what I mean by open up the doors, I mean open up the doors to the enemy, to demons, and they could affect your bloodline. I don't know if that's the case with you and your son, but it is possible. But please continue on.
Yeah, I definitely believe that myself. So he was diagnosed with what they call a rare condition, which it's more or less unheard of. It's very rare. And I remember sat in the room and asking them, was this a result of taking heroin and being on a methadone prescription? And I could just see by the doctor's faces, they tried to avoid the question and just said, we could never be 100%. But the faces really said it all. I think they must have even felt quite sorry for me at the time. I was just streaming in tears. I couldn't, to be honest, the guilt, a lot of people would have thought, well, surely that would have been the turning point in your life. But do you know something? That made it worse, because the guilt was so heavy, my shame and the pain in my heart to look at my own child, that the only way to escape that pain that I couldn't deal with was to leave the hospital and take more drugs. And that's exactly what I continued to do. I took more heroin. I took more crack cocaine. I functioned as a mother. So my children were clean. They were fed. The house was, in a reasonable state. Nobody really knew, as in neighbours and people, what was really going on behind closed doors. But as soon as those doors were shut, the raging drug habits was awful. And that was just how we lived day in, day out. For 20 years, that was my life. It engulfed my life for 20 years. So for 20 years, I took heroin. My children were born into that. They were brought up around that. And I was on antidepressants. I suppose I thought that I never wanted to die, but I wasn't enjoying life either. As far as I was concerned, this was it for me.
So during this whole time, you were a believer in God, correct?
No, I wasn't. If somebody would have said, do you believe in God? I probably would have said, well, maybe there's something out there. That was as far as it would have gone. I never got brought up in a Christian home. Not one of my family, even to this day, are born again. None of them are believers. I always say as yet. But I just haven't been brought. The only time I ever stepped into a church or was around anything of God was maybe a funeral or a wedding. I've never, ever had any church or faith upbringing or told about Jesus in any way at all. So, like the majority of people, faith and Jesus and being born again was all terms I would have not understood. Over that 20 year, really, it was like living the same day in, day out. We used drugs, we got high, we functioned with the children. Then we started to detox. We felt rough. We felt horrendously ill. We had to find more money to do the same thing in the evening. That was it. Day in, day out. I was about 7-ish stone. The weight had dropped off me. I looked horrendous. People knew I looked horrendous, but didn't quite put the connection together of why. My family assumed that I'd sorted myself out, but they always had that doubt because of how poor I looked. But we just lied to everybody. Everything was a lie, which that then takes me really up to 2013, when absolutely everything changed in one night, which if somebody would have told me this, it would have been so shocking to me to listen to this. And it still shocks me now to this day because it's quite surreal. It was a normal day. We'd used drugs. There was nothing out of the ordinary about it. I can't remember the date. I just know that it was February and it was 2013. My partner fell asleep. My boyfriend at the time, we wasn't married, he fell asleep downstairs doing the drugs, and I came up to bed. And I went to sleep. It was a normal night. and I had a nightmare. And it was a nightmare that changed my life, basically. And the nightmare was I was cowering on the floor, cowering against a door in my house. And I could hear the most horrendous, I couldn't even describe how horrendous and how fearful the noises actually were. There was dogs howling, and this awful, just, I don't know how to describe it, evil, awful noise rushing like a wind towards the house. The windows and the doors of the house were banging, and I was screaming. I even knew in the nightmare that whatever it was only tormenting me. I knew it could easily get into the house, and I was just waiting for it to come into the house. I had no doubt in my mind in this nightmare, whatever that is coming for me, and it's coming into this house, and it was just a case of waiting. I actually peeped around the door cowering, and the letterbox of my front door opened, and I actually seen a demon looking at me through the front door. Now, I'd never heard about demons. I barely even would have known what a demon was. And at that moment, it was so horrific, and I was screaming so loud, and then I heard my name called, which I now believe was Satan calling my name. It was just the most sickening, just evil, horrendous, like a seductive voice, and it was actually saying my name, Yvonne, and it was coming towards the house. And at that point, I've never felt fear in the world, in my life, like that, ever, to that level. And at that point, I started screaming at the top of my lungs, Jesus Christ, help me. That's what I screamed. And it was like a blood-curdling scream. You know, it was for my life, which was strange because I wasn't a Christian or any Christian.
So this is a nightmare, but I guess it felt very real to you, like it was really happening.
I remember it to this day, yeah.
Yeah.
And as I shouted, Jesus Christ, help me, as soon as I'd finished those words, the horrendous noises just went and stopped. There was silence. And at that silence, I audibly heard God. I felt his presence, actually. He came from behind me. I didn't see him. He came from behind me. And I audibly heard his voice. And he said, Yvonne, this is your last chance. And I just literally sort of woke up in my bed, sweating, full of fear, panicking, thinking, I just can't believe what's just happened. And at that moment, I literally just had instant revelation that Jesus Christ was God, the devil had come to get me, I just escaped death and I was going to die, and God had stepped in and saved me. I knew that heaven was real, I knew that hell was real, and I was petrified, and the fear of God mainly had hit me like I'd never had in my life. I don't know how. God must have given me peace, because I did fall back asleep after that. But when I woke up in the morning, all my days, I was smoking heroin. Even the morning after, I was smoking heroin, and I was petrified. I knew that God was looking right at me, and the fear of the Lord just hit me. It hit me like the fear of God had hit me so massive that it was bigger than 20 years of taking heroin. And at that point, I was smoking the heroin and I was trembling. And I just thought, please don't kill me, because I was so frightened. I just thought, Lord, please don't take me. And till that evening, so another 12 hours until the evening. And while my partner was downstairs, I told him what had happened. I was crying. I was telling him I had this nightmare, you don't understand. And he was looking at me like, you're crazy, what happened? It's fine, don't worry, you're okay. I'm like, you don't understand. And I came upstairs later that day, and I typed into Google, how do you say sorry to God? I was clueless. I'd never prayed. I just knew this were real. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I just typed into Google, how do you say sorry to God? And I fell on my knees at the side of my bed. And these prayers came up called salvation prayers, which I had no knowledge about. So I must have read numerous of them. I must have read loads, but I meant it in my heart. I really meant it. And as I was on my knees at the side of my bed, all the images of the horrendous, evil things I'd done in my life were flashing through my mind one at a time. And I felt like the dirtiest person ever. I just felt like a sinner. I felt evil. I realised how disgusting my life had been, which I'd never saw that before. And I begged God. I begged him. I pleaded him to forgive me. That went on for I don't know how long, but it felt like hours. I just did that for ages. The day after, I got up and I just knew I couldn't take heroin anymore. Now, my partner was still in the house taking heroin. I had a 6-week detox that was horrendous. It was awful. I didn't go into a rehab. I had 2 kids at home. I literally led on the floor downstairs in my house. I was sweating. I was in agony. My stomach was in agony. My bones were aching, and it just went on and on. I thought it was never going to end. Over that time, I actually started to dream pretty vivid. And I actually had a dream one night. I was led in a bed with a drip in my arm. It was like a hospital bed. I knew that it was making me better, whatever it was. And I got out of bed with this drip and I started walking down a corridor. And as I was walking down this corridor, there were doors all the way down this corridor. And the doors had massive like padlocks on each door with chains joining them. And as I looked up, I was in a white gown. As I looked up, Jesus was at the end, but I couldn't see his face. I didn't see his face, but Jesus was at the end and he was holding the ends of the chains and the locks. He was holding them and every single door was locked. And he said to me, "Keep your eyes on me and you will be okay." And as I looked to the side, the rooms were just full of demons. They were full of them. Every single room, every single window I could see was full of these things. And they just wanted out of that room. They wanted to rip me apart. It was petrifying. And I just started looking. And before I got to the point of approaching Jesus, I woke up in my bed. I had another one where I was on the floor, face down, and I was crawling. You know, many people think that, you know, if you have any encounters with Jesus, you know, you'd be up and down dancing. You know, I was on my face before him. You know, this is a holy God. I was on my face. I was crawling. You know, I didn't dare look up too much. You know, I was crawling towards him and I was crying in this dream. And I said, "How long is this pain going to last?" And he just comforted me and he just said, "Not long." That was all he said, "Not long." Now, in that same dream, he was lifting dark shadows out of me. It was a strange experience. That is all I could see that he was doing. He was lifting them and he was moving them, lifting and moving them, lifting and moving them. And I actually believe he was doing it was personal deliverance that I was receiving at that time.
Right,
but I still had a detox to go through. I still had to go through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
After that, God gave me a vision. Me and my boyfriend were due to get married. And God gave me a vision, an open vision, which I've never experienced. I didn't even know what a vision was. You know, I was on my knees, praying in my lounge. We were still living in the same house together. You know, he was still doing the drugs, you know, and I was still going through this detox, getting towards the end of it. And I was on my knees and a white screen appeared before me. And me and my boyfriend were stood at the altar of the church that we were going to get married in. And a cross fell down the image, like a cross as in like notes and crosses. A cross fell down the image of us, and God just said to me, "You're not matched." And I knew at that point that the relationship had to come to an end, because I'd had this experience with the Lord. It wasn't his time. He didn't have that experience, you know, and we couldn't continue living like that.
And he wasn't a
you know,
born-again Christian, right?
No, he wasn't a Christian.
Okay.
No, and he obviously he didn't know what was happening. You know, he didn't know what was happening to me. Why is she going all strange? What was going on? You know, so it wasn't his fault. You know, he just didn't have this revelation that I had, and it was causing issues in the house. It was just, what is going on with you?
Yeah, and the Bible's clear that we should not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. So, yeah.
Exactly. So God showed me. So I ended the relationship, which was, we'd been together 18 years.
Oh, wow, that's a long time.
A long time, you know. So I ended it. I did it as amicable as we could. You know, I gave him time, you know, to move out and all the rest of it. And we did part ways. Since then, that was February 2013. I have never took heroin again. I've never smoked a cannabis joint again. I got off the methadone prescription. You know, I love Jesus with all my heart. You know, I'm not perfect, you know, but I love him. And I always think that when I get to heaven, if just one person has heard this story and the Holy Spirit moved upon that person and opened the heart and they gave their life to Christ, then it's worth me telling a billion people for that one. And that's why I do it. You know, a lot of my family are not happy for me to tell my story because it's, you know, it's embarrassing to them. You know, it's not a nice story to be telling. But God didn't save me for me to sit at home and do anything, you know, do nothing and sit around. He saved me for me to tell people so that other people could be saved. That's
Amen.
the whole point.
Amen. Amen.
God uses me to evangelize. I love it. Most of my neighbours around here know me as the Christian that was once on heroin, you know. I think some of my neighbours think I am absolutely crazy. We have Bible studies in my house, you know, and they all stand outside like, what is going on in that house? But, you know, I love God, and more than anything, you know, if I know where I would have been, you know, without Jesus. It wasn't one particular sin that would have took me to the hell. It was the fact that I hadn't been forgiven of my sins, you know, and I know that I would have been in hell forever. And I remember once saying to God, I remember crying on the floor and saying, why did you save me? There's all these people out here that live pretty good lives. You know, they haven't done anything horrendous. Why did you save me? I didn't deserve this. Why me in this little town that nobody knows? What did you save me for? And the Holy Spirit said, he came and died to save the sick. You know, he died to save the sick. You know, and I was just overcome with gratefulness. You know, nobody is past saving. Nobody deserves it, but God loves us and will give his grace to anybody anyway. You know, but we have to come to him. We have to repent.
Amen.
And there's just there's no going back, is there? There's no going back. There's only going forward. There is no going back. You can't go back when you're born again. And who'd want to go back to that anyway? The only other thing I didn't mention is when I was doing the detox, and for a good 9 months after, I was having a lot of demonic attacks. I remember the first time I got the Bible off somebody. I remember actually asking God, where do I start? I thought the Bible's so big. I've never even read a magazine cover to cover. How am I going to read that? I didn't do no reading at school. I was like, Lord, how am I going to read this? Where do I start? This book's massive. And the Holy Spirit just said, at the beginning. I thought, well, that was pretty obvious. And as I was reading the first couple of sentences in Genesis, some of the letters were going golden colour and lifting off the page. And I remember thinking, whoa. In fact, I actually think I jumped up and sort of said, whoa, this is something else. The day after that, I did wake up and I had my face pinned literally to the bed. I knew there was something in my room. The devil was not impressed. And I had, you know, I just had nightmare after nightmare. You know, I spent 9 months in a denominational church. I didn't know different churches existed. I didn't know about the way different churches do things. I just ran to the nearest church to me. I told the reverend, or I don't think he was a priest, I think they call him a reverend. I told him my story, and he was like really shocked. He was drinking a cup of tea like, oh, you've had something happen then. And I just thought, I need somebody to understand and tell me what I've just been through. What is this? But I think they were more shocked than anything like it before. I spent 9 months there, but I thought, Lord, there's got to be more than this to church. There's got to be more than this to you people. I've met some lovely people here, but there has to be more than standing up and sitting down and reading off a card and standing up and sitting down and reading off a card. There's got to be more than this. And I found God actually got a leaflet to me a couple of times, actually, the same church. And I went, and that was like a lively Pentecostal church. I was shocked at that. I thought, oh, gosh. But I spent a couple of years there. And even though I was having all these nightmares and things, the pastor there had a lot more understanding about warfare and things that were happening to me. So I think that gave me a lot more comfort. And, you know, it was the typical demonic stuff. You know, I would get choked. I was tormented. You know, my children would be horrendously hurt in front of my eyes in nightmares. You know, it just went on and on and on. But you know something? The more that went on, the more I clung to God.
Amen.
Because I was aware that when God spoke to me in that dream, them things were silent. They wouldn't dare speak when God turned up.
So,
because He more powerful than all the demons put together.
That's what I was about to say, that God is infinitely more powerful than the enemy. And that's why we shouldn't fear the enemy, because God is so much more powerful. In a blink of an eye, he can just, just stop every demon in the whole universe. So
that's it.
Yeah.
So I think that kept me sort of clinging on to him. The only thing that I did go after is I heard people speaking in tongues on a cable channel. I was sat in a blanket doing a detox, shivering, watching people speaking in tongues, thinking, wow, what's that? I want to do that. It was just, I just had no idea. And I was like, Lord, I want to do that. What are they doing? What are they speaking? So it was explained to me what it was. I wanted to get baptized. I was baptized as a baby. I thought, what's that about? I was a baby. I want to get baptized now. And the church that I was with, the denominational church, said, you don't need to get baptized. I was like, no, I have this urge that I have to be baptized. I couldn't explain it. It was just an urgency that I had to be baptized. So the second church I ended up at, thankfully, did do adult baptism. So I was baptized. Then there was an urgency in me. I wanted to be able to pray in tongues, pray in the spirit, and I was urgent, and I was reading books about it, and I was praying for it, and I was seeking it. And then the pastor prayed for me at the front of church, and I was too embarrassed, and I didn't say anything. And I got in my car and drove home, and I thought, well, there's nobody here now. I'm on my own, Lord. I'm just going to open my mouth, let a noise come out, and I'm expecting that I'm going to speak in tongues. And I did all the way home. It was just pouring out of my mouth. I couldn't stop. So that was just a wonderful experience. Since all that, I'm now married. I have 2 more children who I'm bringing up in the Lord. Liam's difficult to look after. We have carers in, and it's hard. But by God's grace, I stand, and I just take one day at a time. And I know the Lord's forgiven me. I didn't deserve to be forgiven, but He has forgiven me, because that's what He does. He forgives when we truly repent. And one day at a time, and I don't worry about the future. I don't think about it, because it's too overwhelming for me, especially when my son's concerned. And there's many times each day I say, Lord, help me. Lord, give me patience. Lord, please give me strength. Lord, I can't do this. Lord, I can do this. And I have constant, conversation with Him, and the Holy Spirit always comforts me and, and corrects me sometimes, but always guides me.
Amen.
Yeah,
Amen.
that's about it. Yeah, free from drugs after 20 years. Amen to that.
That's awesome. That just shows how much grace and love and tender mercies God has. He saved you from from the verge of ending up in a place you don't want to go. And,
I did, yeah.
And by his tender mercies, He saved you. That's awesome. And I've experienced myself the tender mercies of the Lord. I felt the forgiveness and the love of God when I truly repented and turned to Jesus Christ. He wiped away all of my sins, and He can do that for anyone out there who is listening. No matter what you've done, God can forgive you. Your sin is not too big that God cannot forgive you.